Our daily Bible reading today comes from Ezekiel chapter 20 through chapter 21. And our daily devotional today here at Carrollton Christian Fellowship comes from the first portion of Ezekiel chapter 20. With Ezekiel chapter 20, within our devotional, so verses 1 through 26, what we see here is we see Israel's history of sin and God's history of mercy. The first thing that we see Israel's history of sin and God's history of mercy within Egypt and within the wilderness, their time in the wilderness after the Lord had brought them out and directing them and leading them into his promised peace, the promised land that he had promised to give to them through Abraham, through the simple trust and faith that had been placed in the Lord, and that they were asked to continue to place their trust in the Lord. And with that will come God's promised peace. In verses 1 through 4, we see that the same elders from Ezekiel chapter 14, they come to inquire of the Lord. And so these same ones who have been up to mischief and up to idolatry, they continue to just keep coming back. Verses 5 through 7, we see that God's oaths to Israel. So God's promise to Israel from the very beginning and before bringing Israel out of Egypt, before bringing the nation out of there. In verses 8 through 9, we see God's mercy to Israel and Israel's disobedience within Egypt to their idols. So this is something that when we look in Exodus, this is something that we do not see in Exodus. This is something that Exodus does not tell us, that all of the idols that the children of Israel had been given over to while they were in captivity there in Egypt. Then in verses 10 through 17, we see God's mercy to Israel's disobedience while in the wilderness. And then in verses 18 through 20, we see God's appeal to Israel's next generation there in the wilderness. In verses 21 through 24, we see further mercy from the Lord towards Israel in the wilderness. And in verses 25 through 26, we see God's judgment. We see what God's judgment, what the purpose is, and how it plays out. That the purpose and how God's judgment plays out is that it allows Israel to suffer the consequences of their sin. That's the way that God deals out, and God, even oftentimes in our own life, how the Lord deals out correction in our life. And then in verses 25 through 26, we see God's judgment. And God's judgment allows Israel to suffer the consequences of their sin. And so I hope this will be a great encouragement to us, a great encouragement that as we look on and as we read and as we learn from this text here, that God's mercy is never ending. God's grace is never ending. So reach out and cry out to him. If God, in Israel's continual rebellion, will be gracious to Israel, God will be even gracious to us. So again, I hope this will be a great encouragement to us to call out to God's grace and God's mercy and for him to show that to us in our lives. So again, I hope this can be a great encouragement to you and to us today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So take care and have a blessed one.